Good morning, everyone. Beautiful morning. It really is a beautiful morning. And today, I don't want to give you the reality of life, but Passover is not far away. I know for some of you that conjures up some emotion there, but let's try to take out the physical feeling and let's go to more of a spiritual feeling. And I want to talk about the Haggadah, the Passover Seder. And my goal this week, and I'm hoping for the next few weeks until Passover, is to uncover a part of the Seder that you can bring to your Seder and make it relevant, make it practical, and connect it to something in our lives. So, the part of the Seder that I want to bring out today is a part of the Seder that has bothered me for a very long time. Well, many parts of the Seder bother me, but this one really bothers me. And that is, I'll say it in English, if the Holy One, blessed be He, had not taken our fathers out of Egypt, then we, our children, and our children's children would have remained enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. Do you remember this line? Right in the beginning of the Seder. So, why does it bother me? It bothers me, number one, because it has a lot to do with us. There's not that many references to me and you. Our children and our children's children, that's us. So let's just unpack it. Really, really, would we still be slaves in Egypt? I mean, it really seems far-fetched that if God would not have taken us out of Egypt over 3,000 years ago, that 3,000 plus years later, we would still be enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. The pharaohs, the Egyptian dynasty has long been a relic of history. So between the years 1313 BCE and 2011 CE, some water came under the bridge. King David killed Goliath. Plato wrote the Republic. I'm just going to talk about it. And I'm not going to even push into 2025. Let's push to 2025. Let's go. Julius Caesar was stabbed on the steps of the Roman Senate. What else? Constantine embraced Christianity. Muhammad thought he was the last prophet. Shakespeare wrote Hamlet. Washington declared independence. The Wright brothers flew an airplane. Technology, the pandemic, what's going on in the world today with the Jewish people. I mean, there's a lot of things that have happened in the past 3,300 and I think it's 36 years. Yet, we sit down at the Seder and in complete seriousness, we say that if not for the Exodus, you and I would still be slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Are we lying? What's the story? And for me, more important is how do we make this part of our modern lives? So, as much as we commemorate the physical suffering of the Jewish people at the hands of their tyrannical Egyptian oppressors at the Seder, the true slavery the Jewish people were subjugated to was not only of physical nature. To be sure, the physical suffering was tremendous. Jewish children were slaughtered. The Egyptian taskmasters would mercilessly beat down on their subjects who were tasked with impossible and useless jobs. Yet, the slavery ran much deeper. The physical slavery was a byproduct of the human spirit that lay dormant, concealed under the natural notion of a person at the time that all of history is cyclical. Egypt was the superpower of the time. Pharaoh was the demagogue. The concept of a human spark which dreams, which aspires for a better tomorrow didn't exist. People didn't know that freedom is enshrined in the genome of their soul, that they are entitled to a dream of a better future. The Midrash says something fascinating. It says, no slave was able to escape from Egypt. Now, it wasn't that no slave was successful in staging a rebellion. That wasn't the only thing. I think it was even more tragic. No slave possessed the ambition to break out of the shackles. The very walls that retained the slaves were also the walls that stunted the human soul. No person could even entertain the idea of rising up against injustice. There existed no such concept as the great spirit of the human, the greatness that soars and pushes us to discover new horizons, the noble idea that the human being carved in the image of a free God was destined to be free. It was dormant in the psyche of all of these slaves. Despair, surrender, that's what filled their core. Think of slavery as a lack of ambition. It's the worst thing you can do to a people. Every country has a symbol which captures its soul. Egypt was represented by the pyramids, and they still remain standing. I've not seen them in person, nor do I have any desire to go back to Egypt. We left a while ago. We're like, enjoy the pyramids. We're out of here. I don't have any desire to go back. But it is the hallmark of those, and I've spoken to people who've been to Egypt, who have seen them, and they're one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. And they still survive in our times. In the pyramid, there's only one stone that stands alone on top, while the rest are just rows that serve the row on top of it. Each row of stones serves the row above it. All but the stone at the top. I think, and I've pictured this. My kids have like this little toy pyramid, and they go around. Oh, Passover, Passover, and I've noticed this little toy pyramid, that this image geographically depicts the prevailing mentality in Egypt and the rest of civilization. Egyptians saw themselves as rows of stones, subservient to the stones on top of them. Every person saw themselves as a stone serving the one on top of them, while the higher stones were serving those on top of them. It was literally what they call a pyramid scheme. There was only one stone on top, and that was Pharaoh, who legally had no one above him. So he was the God, and I say God in a lowercase g, a demagogue. And this view of life in Egypt was a given. Wherever fate placed you in the hierarchy of the pyramid, that is where your eternal destiny was. That was it. There's nothing you can do about it. No person ever dared to dream otherwise. And there are other places like this. The soul of humanity was all but dead. I've talked about this so many times, but we live in a time of privilege. My classic example is apples grow in aisle 2. We have no idea the source of who we are, and we don't also appreciate where we come from and what's going on and how much freedom we have in our lives on a daily basis. What's interesting, if you want to talk about it from even a, a vegetative element, even nature conceded. The Egyptian Nile irrigated the land's entire vegetation without any dependence on the annual precipitation. Nothing was dependent on human investment. There was no creativity in Egypt. Human labor wouldn't make it or break it. It was all fixed. It was all preordained. So, what I want to venture to say, and what I want to bring to your Seder table, is that Moses did not only free slaves, he introduced a new vocabulary, the vocabulary of freedom. Moses breathed a new life into a shackled world, a new belief that spirit can dominate matter, that every person is intrinsically a free spirit with endless horizon that can never be completely dominated, that each person is an end in of themselves, and that their existence has infinite value. Moses was the first person to ever stand up to the tyrant Pharaoh and make demands. It wasn't even what he said. It was that he said something. Demands of a Pharaoh on behalf of slaves. Unheard of. Completely unheard of. Today we take it for granted. We live in a democracy. When Moses declared, "Let my people go," a new consciousness was introduced into humanity. That a person, that a human can aspire to change, to transcend, to go beyond, to transform, to be free physically, psychologically, spiritually. So, if not for the exodus from Egypt, the entire human history would have been different. It's not only that the Jews would have remained there for the time, it's that all civilization would remain in a standstill, no development, no progress. We would still be enslaved, descendants of the ancient Egyptians, because the concept of change would have been non-existent. It had to be invented. So the Exodus, the freedom, was not only a national liberation, it was a cosmic liberation. It shaped the future of the entire human race. It's not only a chapter in Jewish history, but it's the very script of the free world. It's not the redemption of the human spirit from the shackles and the despair of hopelessness. So, with this freedom of the Israelites, of the Jewish people out of Egypt, the whole world woke up from a long winter that was deep and cold. Spring. Spring had arrived in the world. And that's why the Torah instructs us to observe Passover always in the springtime. It's not an easy task. I'm not sure if you realize that the way the calendar is set up, it's very hard. I mean, maybe you know that Ramadan kind of jumps around because our months, our calendar, the Jewish calendar, is really lunar. And lunar would not make for the seasons because it moves around. But because the Torah says that Passover has to always be in the springtime, we actually use a lunar solar calendar. I won't go into the details of that calendar, but basically, 7 times in 19 years, there's an extra month. And the purpose of that month is to catch up with the solar calendar so that Passover can always be in the spring. That's the entire reason. That's why the extra month is at the end. It's at the second Adar. And we have to go to great lengths in order to ensure that Passover coincides with spring. Why? Why is it so necessary? It's because the season of spring embodies the essence of Passover. Passover will forever remain the spring of civilization. After a frigid winter, after hibernation, the trees barren, the leaves are lifeless, the climate dreary and depressing. All of a sudden, spring comes with a new song on its lips. Nature awakens from its slumber. So, the story of Passover, when we sit at our Seder table, when we tell our children and we tell our families and we tell our guests, it wasn't a single event that occurred 3,300 plus years ago. The story of Passover is an ongoing story. Throughout the ages, millions of people, downtrodden and dejected, turned to this story, the story of Moses and the freed slaves, the Exodus, to at least dream for a better tomorrow and to start actively working for it. This idea of freedom is planted in the human psyche, the seed of liberty, the mentality of freedom, the vocabulary of emancipation. Wherever you observe a revolution, wherever you observe a voice yearning for change to the better, for justice, for truth, for kindness, for integrity, for an end of exploitation, for an end of abuse, you will see the imprint of this story. You will see, most recently, Martin Luther King. He employed that oratory, this story, so many times. And you'll see every single nation that wanted to be free looked at this story because we proved it to the world that you can be enslaved and freed in a single generation. So now let's go personal. Do you ever wake up in the morning and say to yourself, I will not be a victim anymore? My trauma will not define me any longer? Do you ever hear an inner voice? I will confront my darkness and I'll utilize it to grow. That is this story. That is the Exodus playing itself again and again outside in your life. That voice, that's the Exodus. It's the voice of the Exodus saying, you are free. Nowhere is the truth more evident than the story of the United States of America, from the Pilgrims to the Founding Fathers, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement. Americans have turned to one biblical prophet, and that was Moses. Because Moses offers a narrative, a roadmap of a promise in a world of peril. Most of the pilgrims who settled in what they called New England of America in the early 17th century, they were Puritan refugees, escaping religious persecutions in Europe. And these people viewed their immigration from England as a virtual reenactment of the Exodus. To them, England was Egypt, the king was the Pharaoh, the Atlantic Ocean was the Red Sea, America was the land of Israel. They spoke about it. And the natives were the ancient Canaanites. They called themselves the New Israelites, entering into a new covenant with God and a new promised land. That's why they named their cities there in New England, Bethlehem, and the, I mean there's tons of biblical cities all over New England. The Pilgrims described their fight for freedom as being like that of Moses. George Washington attributed the success of the revolution to the same deity who freed the Israelites. American slaves made Go Down Moses their national anthem. I'll give you another example. Immediately after the passing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, the Congress asked Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams to propose a seal of the United States. Their recommendation, though it never materialized, the first image was Moses leading the Israelites across the Red Sea while Pharaoh drowns. Later, they did make a seal, and on that seal, there is a Star of David. The Pharaoh has long represented this intransience of power. The Pilgrims called King James of England the Pharaoh. Thomas Paine called the king the Pharaoh. Civil rights marchers branded Jim Crow the Pharaoh. At the time of the American Revolution, the interest in the knowledge of Hebrew was so widespread as to allow the circulation of the story that certain members of Congress had proposed that the use of English be formally prohibited in the United States and Hebrew substituted for it. I think a lot of Americans don't know this. And when Pennsylvania Assembly ordered the Bell of Liberty in 1751, what did they choose to put on it? An inscription from Leviticus: proclaim liberty, throw all the lands to all the inhabitants thereof. That's the story of the Exodus. Now you can decide what you think of it today. Fast forward. But there's something here. When we sit around the Seder table, we're not sitting and talking of an ancient story. It keeps on getting repeated. I'll give you another example. One of my favorite heroes, Harriet Tubman. Remarkable woman. An African-American abolitionist, a humanitarian, a Union spy during the American Civil War. What was she famously nicknamed? Do you know? Moses. They called her Moses. Look it up. Why? Because during the horrific era of slavery in the U.S., triggering the Civil War, this woman liberated thousands of slaves. One day, this adolescent slave girl, Tubman, was sent to a dry goods store for some supplies. And she encountered a slave owner, a slave that was owned by a different family who had left the fields without permission. His overseer, furious, demanded that Tubman help restrain the young man. And she refused, and the slave ran away. The overseer threw a 2-pound weight at him. But instead of hitting the slave, it hit Tubman, which she said broke my skull. She writes this, bleeding and unconscious. She's returned to her master's house, and she laid on the seat of a loom, where she remained there without medical care for 2 days. She was sent back to the fields, She writes with blood and sweat rolling down my face until I couldn't see. Her master said she was not worth a six piece, and she returned. They returned her to her original owner, who tried unsuccessfully to sell her. Tubman took all her pain, and she turned it into one of the greatest human acts of courage, setting free slave after slave after slave. And for this, she, she was called Moses. It's not by chance. And I've said this before, but I'll say it again. They could easily find another story. Go find your own great story. Why are you using our story? But we're happy to share. And our story has become the backbone of so many great Tubmans, of so many great people that have dreamt the dream, that have wanted better for themselves and for the world. So, I'll finish today with this, because I want to make it personal and I want to make it practical. Every time your heart moves to transcend fear, every time your heart moves you to break a barrier, to go beyond the status quo, to battle injustice, to transform your life for the better, to subdue an addiction, to confront a bad habit or a bad attribute, remember and tell your children and tell your family and tell your guests at your Seder that it's all because the Lord had sent Moses to stand up to Pharaoh and to take us out of Egypt. If the Holy One, blessed be He, had not taken our fathers out of Egypt, then we, our children, and our children's children would have remained enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. So every time you stand in front of a mirror and you declare, I will not settle for mediocrity any longer. I will not be a victim to instinct any longer, to lies, to abuse. That has been triggered the moment that Moses stood before the stone atop the pyramid, the Pharaoh, and said, Thus said the Lord, let my people go and they will serve me. Passover is one of the greatest stories ever told. But it's not just a story, it's our reality. It gives us the vocabulary of freedom. And think about it for a moment. Where would humanity be without it? And I'll change that narrative saying, what can your future look like with it? May God give us the ambition, the ability, the power, the grace, and the gifts to be able to truly experience freedom this Passover. To be able to sit around the table and to make this story real. To bring it home in a way that has become so real for so many of us, but really not connected. And now we can connect it to so many things going on in our lives, to so many things going on in the world. And may this Passover be the true spring of this generation, filled with life, with love, with fresh flowers, and all of the great gifts that we wish for one another and for our families and for our friends. With that, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.